Hi, welcome to Stone Age Audiocast, Edition 10. This time we are going to discuss about a few nuanced methods applied in composing.
Emotional mapping through harmonic tension refers to how composers use chords and their relationships to create specific feelings in music. It is a way of using harmony to guide the listener's emotional experience. For example, stable and consonant harmonies, often built with simple intervals, can evoke feelings of peace and resolution. On the other hand, dissonant chords and unstable progressions, full of clashing intervals, can build tension, suspense, or even anxiety. Composers also use the movement between different harmonies to create emotional journeys. They might start with simple, consonant harmonies and gradually increase tension by introducing more dissonant chords. The release of tension can be very satisfying for the listener, often achieved by resolving dissonant chords to consonant ones. Layering inaudible frequencies involves adding sounds that are outside the range of human hearing to music. While these frequencies cannot be consciously heard, they can still affect the way we perceive the music. For instance, very low frequencies, below 20 Hz, can be felt as vibrations and can add a sense of depth or power to the overall sound. Similarly, very high frequencies, above 20,000 Hz, while not heard, might affect the perceived clarity or spaciousness of the music. These inaudible frequencies are often used to subtly enhance the emotional impact of the music. They can also be used to create a more immersive listening experience. Rhythmic displacement involves moving rhythmic patterns from their expected positions in a musical measure. This can create a sense of syncopation or offbeat feeling, making the rhythm more engaging and unpredictable. For example, instead of emphasizing the downbeat, a composer might place accents on the offbeats, creating a groove that feels slightly out of phase. Off-grid grooves take this concept further by creating rhythmic patterns that do not conform to traditional bar lines or beat structures. These rhythms often feel less rigid and more organic, with the feeling of being free from a strict grid. Composers use these techniques to create a sense of complexity and motion, adding interest and surprise to the music. Hidden melodic counterpoint involves weaving melodies together in a way that is not immediately obvious to the listener. Instead of distinct melodies that stand out individually, the lines blend together to create a richer texture. These hidden melodies might appear within the harmonies or be subtly woven into the background. They contribute to the overall sound but are not as prominent as the main melodies. This technique adds depth and complexity to the music, encouraging repeated listens to fully appreciate all the melodic layers. The subtle interplay between hidden melodic lines can create a more engaging and rewarding listening experience. Dynamic range manipulation involves using the difference between the loudest and softest parts of a piece of music to create emotional impact. A wide dynamic range, where there's a significant difference between the quietest and loudest sections, allows for greater expressiveness. Soft passages can create a sense of intimacy or fragility, while loud passages can convey power or intensity. By carefully controlling the dynamic range, composers can emphasize certain emotions or build tension and release. For example, a sudden shift from a quiet passage to a loud one can create a dramatic effect. This technique is essential for shaping the emotional narrative of the music. Spectral layering and frequency carving involve manipulating the frequency content of sounds to create different textures and effects. Spectral layering refers to combining sounds with different frequency ranges. For example, adding a layer of high-pitched sounds on top of a low-pitched bass line. This can create a sense of depth and complexity in the music. Frequency carving, on the other hand, involves selectively removing certain frequencies from a sound to make room for other instruments or elements. This can prevent sounds from clashing with each other and create a cleaner mix. These techniques allow composers to shape the overall sonic texture of the music, giving them greater control over the perceived balance and clarity of different elements. The psychological use of dissonance refers to how composers employ clashing or unstable harmonies to evoke specific emotional responses in the listener. Dissonance creates a feeling of tension, instability, or unease. By carefully controlling the amount and placement of dissonance, composers can create a sense of anticipation or conflict. The way in which dissonance is resolved or left unresolved also has a significant emotional impact. For example, resolving dissonance into consonance can evoke a sense of relief or resolution. However, leaving it unresolved can create a lingering feeling of tension or uncertainty. Composers use these techniques to guide the listener's emotional journey, creating moments of anxiety, suspense, or release. Tempo modulation involves changing the speed of the music to influence its emotional impact and pacing. A faster tempo can create a feeling of excitement, urgency, or energy, while a slower tempo can evoke feelings of calmness, sadness, or reflection. Gradual tempo changes can also be used to build anticipation or create a sense of flow. For instance, slowing down the tempo can signal a transition to a more introspective passage. Composers often use tempo modulation to control the overall pacing of the music, creating emotional highs and lows and guiding the listener's experience. Hidden leitmotifs are recurring musical themes or motifs that are not immediately obvious to the listener. They might be fragments of melodies or rhythmic patterns that appear subtly throughout the piece. These leitmotifs often represent specific characters, ideas, or emotions. Thematic development is the process of transforming or evolving these musical themes throughout the piece. This can involve changes in rhythm, harmony, or melody. Composers use hidden leitmotifs and thematic development to create a sense of unity and cohesion in a musical work. These techniques can also add layers of meaning and complexity, rewarding repeated listens. Spatialization and psychoacoustic effects involve manipulating the way sound is perceived in space to create a more immersive and engaging listening experience. Spatialization refers to placing sounds in specific locations within the stereo field or using surround sound to create a three-dimensional sonic environment. This can create a sense of movement, distance, or depth. Psychoacoustic effects, on the other hand, use principles of auditory perception to create specific auditory illusions. For example, techniques like reverb and delay can create the illusion of a larger space. By combining spatialization and psychoacoustic effects, composers can create a richer and more dynamic soundscape that enhances the listener's emotional connection with the music. Nonlinear arrangement in music involves structuring a piece in a way that does not follow a traditional linear progression. Instead of a clear beginning, middle, and end, the music might jump between different sections or ideas in a way that feels less predictable. This can create a sense of fragmentation or disorientation, adding an element of surprise to the listening experience. Nonlinear arrangements often challenge the listener's expectations and encourage a deeper engagement with the music. This approach might use techniques like repetition and variation to bring the listener back to certain ideas, but not always in the order they were initially presented. This creates a sense of interconnectedness among the sections without a linear narrative. Microtonal inflections involve using intervals smaller than the standard semitones found in Western music. These intervals, called microtones, can create unique and subtle variations in pitch. They can also evoke different emotional responses. Microtonal inflections can add a sense of exoticism or create a feeling of instability and tension. Composers might use these inflections to subtly alter the emotional color of a melody or harmony, adding a sense of nuance and complexity. They offer a wider palette of sounds to work with beyond the traditional 12 notes of the Western scale. Hidden rhythmic polymeters involve layering different rhythmic patterns that have different time signatures or subdivisions, but in a way that's not immediately obvious to the listener. While the surface of the music might seem to have a regular beat, there are multiple rhythmic layers working simultaneously. These layers can create a sense of complexity, movement, and subtle tension. These polymeters are often hidden in the sense that the listener may not consciously perceive them. They provide a subtle undercurrent that enhances the rhythmic texture of the music. Emotional anchoring with pedal points involves using a sustained note or chord, often in the bass, to create a sense of stability or grounding in the music. This sustained note acts as a point of reference, while other harmonies and melodies move above it. The pedal point can create a feeling of anticipation and tension. It also emphasizes the chords and melodies that occur around it. Composers use this technique to anchor the music emotionally, providing a sense of continuity and stability even as the harmony shifts and evolves. This can create a feeling of resolution or highlight emotional peaks. The rule of 3 in melodic development refers to the idea that musical ideas often sound complete and satisfying when presented 3 times. This doesn't mean that a melody must literally repeat 3 times without variation, but rather that the concept can be applied in various ways. For example, you might have a statement of a melodic idea, a varied repeat, and then a final variation or conclusion. Another approach would be to have a musical phrase, a contrasting phrase, and then a return to the original idea to create a sense of balance. The rule of three provides a basic framework for building melodies, but it's not a rigid law, so it's often used to create a feeling of completeness and resolution in a musical phrase. Silence in composition is a powerful tool that can be used to create a variety of effects. It's not just the absence of sound, but it can be a deliberate element, shaping the music's rhythm and phrasing, for example. Silence can create tension and anticipation, leading the listener to expect the next sound, or it can also create contrast by punctuating loud passages with sudden quiet moments, which can heighten the impact of both. Silence can also provide space for musical ideas to breathe, and it can be used to mark the ends of phrases or sections, thereby providing structure. The use of silence is as important as the use of sound in creating musical expression. Hybrid orchestration refers to the blending of traditional orchestral instruments with non-traditional or electronic sounds. This technique expands the sonic palette available to composers, allowing for more diverse and contemporary textures. For example, synthesizers, samples, processed recordings, and other electronic elements can be combined with acoustic instruments. This can add unique timbres, rhythmic complexity, and harmonic depth to the traditional orchestral sound. The goal of hybrid orchestration is to create a cohesive and expressive soundscape where acoustic and electronic elements complement and enhance each other, rather than simply existing side by side. Mode mixture is a technique where a composer borrows chords from a parallel key, typically the parallel major or minor, to create emotional contrast within a piece. For example, in a piece in C major, a composer might introduce chords borrowed from C minor, like the minor IV chord, to add a sense of melancholy or darkness. This sudden shift from a bright major sound to a darker minor sound creates a striking emotional effect. Mode mixture can add complexity and depth by allowing composers to navigate a wide spectrum of emotions without necessarily changing the overall key of the piece. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, is a mathematical proportion that has been used in art and architecture, and it can also be applied to musical structure. In music, composers might use the golden ratio to determine the length of sections, the placement of climaxes, or the division of a piece into parts. For example, if a piece is 100 measures long, a significant structural point might occur around measure 62, calculated using the golden ratio, which is approximately 100 over 1.618. The idea behind this is that these proportions create a sense of balance and natural flow. While its use is not always conscious, the golden ratio can be a tool for creating aesthetically pleasing structures, giving a sense of organic growth. Psychological priming with pre-echoes involves the subtle use of sounds or musical motifs that precede a main musical event, preparing the listener for what is about to happen. These pre-echoes act like a musical foreshadowing. For example, a fragment of a melody or a specific rhythm might be introduced subtly before the full melody appears. This technique can create a sense of anticipation and recognition when the full theme arrives, making it seem more impactful. Pre-echoes can also work subconsciously, influencing the listener's emotional response to the subsequent music. By using pre-echoes, composers can create a more engaging and psychologically nuanced listening experience.